Hello, fellow book nerds! Today I'm going to be reviewing A Wild and Unremarkable Thing by Jen Castleberry. So if you haven't heard of this book, this is a novella by Jen Castleberry coming out in January of 2018. It's a high fantasy story featuring a strong female heroine, a wild adventure, and dragons. So if you like Throne of Glass and some of the other books I've mentioned on this channel, then I think you'll enjoy this one. This will be a spoiler-free review. Obviously, I don't want to give anything away for you guys, and it's not released yet. So please keep watching, even though you haven't read it yet. I'll just give you a quick little intro to the plot so you kind of know where I'm coming from. So this book features Cody, who is a girl who's been forced to live as a boy in order to enter this contest to kill a fire scale or a dragon in order to win the purse and save her family from poverty. So that's kind of the main thrust of the story, her journey into this contest to kill the fire scale. That's sort of the main plot, but there's also a secondary plot with a character named Wolfgang, who is the crown prince's friend, and their friend group is a bunch of rich guys, obviously with the crown prince, and they just hang out and joke and live life and have fun, but then he gets it into his head that he wants to kill a fire scale and become a hero with no training. So we have Cody on the one hand with tons of training entering the competition to save her family, and then we have Wolfgang on the other hand with no training whatsoever in order to make a name for himself. So that's sort of like the two converging plots. And then there's another element thrown in there with another character called Penn, and I won't give away his backstory, but it's quite interesting. It throws in some mythology and some good stuff in there. So this novella was sent to me by Jen Castleberry in exchange for a review. So because it was the electronic version, I'll put the cover up here so you can see it, but I can't actually show you the physical copy. So yeah, let's get started with the review. As usual, I'll be organizing my review into 5 parts: the world, the plot, the characters, the themes, and the writing itself. So let's get started. Number 1, the world. So this is the best part of this book for me. Even though it's high fantasy, everything about it just felt really fresh. Like even the way that the dragons were described, they're called fire scales in this story. It just felt new and different. The basic structures of this society, the different creatures, the mythology, all of it has been done before, but somehow Jen was able to infuse it with something new. I don't know, I can't even really explain what exactly, but just everything felt very original and very fresh, and yeah, something that I hadn't seen before. One of the interesting bits for me was that she draws a lot on Greek mythology, but it's not entirely clear, so it's that same sense of this is really familiar to me, except for there's something different that I can't pinpoint and I really want to know more about this. So the world gets a solid 9 out of 10 for me. I thought it was really great. It's the best part of this story. Number 2, the plot. So the plot for me was a 6 out of 10, and this is mostly because I found the first half quite boring, which maybe isn't fair, but I don't know. Personally, I found it really hard to get into until sort of like the halfway point, and then suddenly it got really good and I was sucked in and I couldn't put it down. So I was actually, this is terrible, but I was prepared to give it a really low score, and then kind of like 100 pages in, suddenly it just captured me, so I bumped it up. But again, like, this could be just maybe the mood when I started it, and I don't know, but I don't know, I can't even say what it was exactly, but something about the beginning. I think because it was a novella, there was not a lot of time to really get into the plot points that were happening, so things happened really fast without much sort of emotional tension or justification, so I found it kind of difficult to really care what was happening to the characters until sort of halfway through, once I'd gotten to know them more. So yeah, I think maybe it's just a preference. I prefer sort of a longer, meatier novel that has a lot more build up before things happen. Also in the plot, there was a little bit of sort of insta-love going on. I won't tell you between who, but I'm not usually a huge fan of that, and so it didn't feel justified. And again, maybe it's because it was novella and there wasn't time to really develop it, but I didn't find it believable. I kind of wish that it had grown more gradually, but then, you know, humans are horny people, so maybe that's just me. Number 3, the characters. So I'm giving the characters a 5 out of 10. I'm sorry, Jen. There's sort of 4, I'll say 4 main characters. The Crown Prince, Penn, Cody, who's the protagonist, and Wolfgang. And I found all of the side protagonists, like the side main characters, really interesting. But the main character, I don't know, I could not get on board with her. I don't know why, because there was nothing wrong with her, and, you know, I don't know, it just felt like she didn't really have a personality for some of it, like, and by the end you realize that the point is that she's finding herself, and she's been repressing her true self the whole time, and so as we discover things about her, she's also discovering things about herself. But again, maybe it's because it was a novella and there wasn't enough time to get into it. I didn't find that progression so believable, and I was kind of wondering like where her personality was at the beginning, and then it kind of came out later towards the end. So I see why it was done that way, but I found it, maybe that was the reason I found the beginning kind of boring, was because I didn't care about Cody at all. However, the side characters were very interesting. Fairs, I'm not sure how you say his name, but the Crown Prince was just delightful. He is, to quote Magnus Bane, a freewheeling bisexual. Actually, most people in this book were freewheeling bisexuals, but like, yeah, he was just like super funny and like, just, I'm loving life. Like, I'm having a good time. You want to have a good time with me? Let's do it. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed him. And then Wolfgang, there's some really interesting things done with Wolf. I thought initially, actually I don't want to spoil it, so my ring just went flying. I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say much, but I found him really interesting because where I thought he was going to go in terms of his character arc in the beginning turned out to be completely different from where he actually went, so that was really awesome. And then Penn as well, similar to Wolfgang, I thought he was going one way and then he was taken another way as well. And he had a lot of, there were good bits about him, but again, there wasn't enough for me. It was, actually, he reminded me a lot of Rhysand from the ACOTAR series in some ways, but it wasn't quite developed enough for me to really, like, become invested. So yeah, I think it was like we got the tip of the iceberg, but like, I wanted the full iceberg. Number 4, the themes. I really liked the themes, considering it was a novella and there wasn't a lot of time to develop certain things. There was a really interesting play going on in terms of like reversal of gender roles and a reversal of who you think is good and bad. I guess not a reversal, but I guess a surprise. It's the kind of sense of nobody is entirely what they seem in the beginning, and we're all far more complex than our stereotype might make us out to be. There was a really interesting gender reversal going on with Cody and Wolfgang. So Cody's our female protagonist, and she was very sexually, like, not aggressive, but like confident in her sexuality, even though she hadn't had a chance to express it before the book. And she was, you know, rough and tumble, I don't care what I look like, I'm gonna go fight the monster, I'm gonna save my family, like, I can do this. And I mean, she was raised as a boy, you find out that in the beginning, so she had taken on these sort of masculine qualities because her dad forced her to, and so part of the story is her discovery of her feminine side, which was quite interesting. But in the beginning, she's, you know, the rough and tumble hero, and then Wolfgang, on the other hand, was the kind of like spoiled princess, just wanting to read books and, you know, caring about what he looked like and being all, ugh, the peasants, and like, yeah, so much more like the typical girly traits. Like if someone was to insult you by calling you girly, first of all, fuck you if you do that. But yeah, he kind of exemplified some of those traits, so that was quite an interesting switch. And then there was also a really interesting contrast developed between Cody and Penn in terms of like the discussion of the value of life. So for Cody, she kind of represents the more objective morality. We should try to fight for a better world. It's not enough just to live. We should actually work towards something better and something good, because goodness is a real thing. Versus Penn, on the other hand, has a complete opposite perspective of just, well, I guess not opposite, but a contrasting perspective of it doesn't matter what your life looks like as long as you're living, because it's life, and life itself is a gift regardless of what that life looks like. So that was quite an interesting dynamic as well that I really enjoyed. So for themes, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Number 5, the writing. So for the writing, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. It was definitely good, but it was also kind of a mixed bag. So at points, there were parts that I just thought were so beautiful and so poetically written, but then other times there would be lines in there that I'm like, where did this come from? So I don't know, I'll read you a few quotes so you can get a sense of it. I think overall it was really solid and actually much better than a lot of the writing you see in YA. It was much more poetic and less of just like cliche description, so I really enjoyed that aspect, but there were definitely some bits that I didn't get, but maybe it was just it didn't speak to me, but I'll read you some so you can get a sense of what I mean. So here's an example of a passage that I really liked. That's quite characteristic of her poetic style all the way throughout. So I'm just going to be reading it on my screen here, so that's why my eyes are going to be down there. Here we go. Oh, also I'm going to replace the names so that there's no spoilers as to who it is. Okay, so her arm brushes his when she leans in to pat the horse. Elbow kissing elbow, wrist whispering to wrist, and he feels alive. Ooh, who is it about? So yeah, so that's some of the writing that I really liked. But then you also have lines like this. When they find their father, they know that it is blood and not clay stamped into the dirt. They know because he's wet and shining with blood and not clay. So maybe that's just me and it's supposed to be poetic or interesting, but I'm like, well, if they know it's not blood because it's not blood, well, yeah. They would, in fact, know that. So, I don't know. But it's just like, that's why overall I thought the writing was good, but then every so often I'd come across a line like that I just didn't get. Again, it could totally be a preference thing. So I still think it's worth reading and it's higher quality than a lot of YA that you see. One thing I'll also add for this section is that this book is quite crass at points. It's very sexually charged, even though there's actually very little sex in it. The characters are constantly making innuendos, jokes, and sometimes the descriptions are just very sexual, and I know a lot of you that watch me are quite young, so I think I would recommend this more to the older teens rather than some of you that are on the younger end. Obviously, you know what you're used to reading, but just a warning that there is a lot of sexual content, at least in terms of the language. Yeah, so overall, I really enjoyed this novella, and I think you guys will too, especially if you persevere. If you were like me at all, you might find the beginning a little slow, but I definitely think it's worth reading through to the end, and that's why I'm giving this book overall a 7 out of 10. So thank you so much, Jen, for sending me your arc. I really enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck with your release.